Hello and welcome. We continue with the history from 4, and here now we are looking at the economic situation in Asia after the war, after the First World War. A lot of things changed, and again, economically, many territories, many countries struggled. Now, here we will be looking at the economic conditions in or situation in Asia. And in this part, it's not very long, but we are going to look at the situation after the war, whereby we are going to look at the domination of Japan and the clash of policies between Japan and the Western countries, that is the European countries. Now, in this part, we are going to look at how Japan now tried to influence and dominate the economic situation in Asia in competition with the European countries. Now it is very, very important part, this one, because it is from here that we are going to see that Japan also took a major role in the Second World War. But here we are looking at the situation in Japan, economic situation in Asia after the war. So basically we are going to center much or talk much on Japan, which at last we are going to see that developed the policy of Asia, or championed the policy of Asia for Asians. So this one, it is a really wonderful topic that we are going to look at. So let's be together as we proceed in this topic. Economic situation in Asia. So by 1890, Japan was so industrialized, and because of that, she started to look for new materials or raw materials and markets as well. So this one, it was she was searching from China. So with that, France as well as Germany, they were preventing Japan to annex a territory in China around this period of 1894-1895. So what happened was that in 1910, or by 1910, then Russia took Manchuria from China, and Japan was bitter for this, because we are saying that Japan was looking for materials from China as well. So she was bitter with the action of Russia in 1910. So before that, that was in 1902, Japan signed what was called the Anglo-Japanese Treaty. The Anglo-Japanese Treaty. This was in 1902. So why did she do that? The reason was that she wanted to put herself in a safe position in case of a war with Russia, because they were competing for the same place, that is China. And what happened after the 1902 Anglo-Japanese Treaty was that in 1904, then Japan attacked Russia. And that attack, or during that war, Japan won the war. And this was resolved in USA at Portsmouth. So there was a Treaty of Portsmouth. Then Japan gained South Manchuria. It was resolved at the Portsmouth Treaty in USA. So she gained South Manchuria and southern part of Sakhalin Island. Then immediately after that, Japan started to embark on the policy that was called the aggressive foreign policy. Now let's look at Japan, or the impact of the First World War on Japanese economy, because mind you, we are looking at the economic situation in Asia. What was the condition of the economy in Asia. So we are looking at Asia as Japan dominating the Asia because she was more industrialized. So what was the impact of the World War on Japan? So we have to know and remember that Japan entered the war in August 1923. So she was not affected much. Why? Because she was very far from the battlefronts, that is from Europe. She was very far from Europe. So before the war itself, her trade was increasing. And why was it like that? The reason was that she was the greatest supplier of silk. Silk. We hear the silk, the cloth, the cloth. So the silk that was made from Japan, it was the original one from the natural, from the natural cause. So they were making that one. And Japan was the largest supplier of this silk. So with that great supplying of silk, it happened that USA was the largest customer for the products from China, from Japan. So we see to it Japan was flourishing in trade because he had also the readily available markets in USA. So during the war, again, Japan was flourishing, or the economy was also flourishing because she was supplying the warships. She supplied the warships to the Allies. But after the war, the economy of Japan now began to go down. So why was it like that? It was mainly because the European countries now, they recovered from the war effects. As we have looked at it, that the European countries, they suffered a lot, but later on, they embarked on recovering their economies. And after they recovered their economies, it meant that they were no longer now relying on the imports from other countries. And that one again affected Japan because she was relying on exporting her goods to Europe as well as to USA. And the Japanese economy was not only affected by the exports, also the harsh working conditions in Japan also made things worse in their economy. And not only that, at one point in time, there was a great earthquake known as the Great Kanto earthquake, the Great Kanto earthquake. So that one, it made the matters worse. So the economy really went down because of destruction of many things during that earthquake. And not only that, the economy of Japan was also greatly affected by the 1929 Great Depression. So the Great Depression started in USA, but it affected all other parts of the world. So as we have just said, that USA was the largest customer of the Japanese products. So when USA was affected in 1929, it also affected Japanese economy badly. And with that, we see to it that USA also stopped. USA stopped importing goods from Japan. And also, the economy of Japan was affected when Western countries developed the artificial silk. They have said that the Japanese, they were making a silk from the natural cause, but the people were buying a lot of that silk. But then when they looked at the European countries looked at the high demand, they started developing the artificial silk. And that one worsened the Japanese industry or silk industry. So with that then, and many other points that we have looked at, then companies were no longer employing workers. What does this mean? It means that people were jobless. So about 3 million Japanese were found jobless. 3 million Japanese were found without job. And also Japan lacked some resources like rubber and oil. So Japan had no rubber as well as oil, but they needed those things. So lacking of those resources may also affected a lot their economy. So with that then, when the economy of Japan was going down, then she started to look for areas in China and Korea whereby she can find raw materials as well as maybe markets for her products. So that's why we started by saying that she was eyeing for China, she was eyeing for other areas for markets as well as raw materials. However, most areas in Asia were under the colonial influence. That is to say, they were under the British or the French or the Americans. So basically, the Americans and the Europeans, they dominated most of the places in Asia. You remember we talk of the Middle East. Places like Iraq and the like, they were all that area, it was under the British. And we talk of India under the British. So most places in Asia, they were dominated by the Europeans as well as the Americans. Therefore, Japan adopted the aggressive foreign policy. So this aggressive foreign policy, it was mainly directed at capturing territories in Asia, see, as a source of raw materials and markets. So you see to it that she was looking for markets. She was looking for places where she could get raw materials, but those places were already occupied, were already taken by others. Then it was a problem for Japan. Then that's why we are saying that she adopted this policy of aggressive foreign policy, whereby she wanted to get other or capture other territories by force. So she adopted a philosophy or developed a philosophy that was called Asia for Asians. So you can understand the reasons, or maybe just getting this one, Asia for Asians. You see to it that she saw to it that Asia is dominated by foreign countries like the Europeans and the Americans. So at the same time, she wanted also to have a part, a hand in a dominant market in Asia. Therefore, that's why she had that aggressive foreign policy to say now, from now on, we are saying Asia for Asians. Let's do our own things in Asia. So this policy, it was intended to liberate Asia from the European and the American influence. So that's basically the aim of the Asia for Asians policy, dominated by or advocated by Japan. But behind it, you have to know the situation. You have to remember the condition, economic condition that is driving Japan to adopt that philosophy of Asia for Asians. Now, let's try to dig more. Let's explore more why Japan championed this philosophy of Asia for Asians. Why did Japan champion this philosophy of Asia for Asians? So the first one, the first reason was economic problems. So as we have pointed out, economic problems in Japan from the Great Depression put pressure on the Japanese society. So it means that the economy in Japan was now really bad. They could not export their things because their customers now are also suffering. And also with that, Japan had the growing population. So this growing population, it needed the living space. Hence, they wanted to extend to Manchuria. They wanted Manchuria for a living space. So number one there, we are looking at economic problems. They drive Japan to adopt or to champion the philosophy of Asia for Asians. The second one, Japan wanted resources for the industries. So she wanted resources such as rubber and oil for her growing industries. So to do that, she wanted to have or to capture areas by force, and those areas that had resources, such resources like rubber and oil, those ones were necessary for Japan. So that's why she wanted Asia for Asian philosophy. The other one was, or the other factor was the rise of military traditions. So in 1930s or during the 1930s, the government was dominated by the generals and admirers, because during that time there was that rise of military tradition. So with that, the government itself, it was dominated by the military itself. So with that, they managed to invade Manchuria in 1931. So because of that military tradition of dominating every place. So with that then, it was able to champion, or Japan was able to champion Asia for Asian, because the military were already there to do the work of capturing or invading other territories. Hence, they invaded Manchuria in 1931. And also, Japan imitated the American dominance of Western Hemisphere. So the Americans, they dominated most of the part of the Western Hemisphere. So the Japanese also, they wanted to control the vast resources in Asia, just as the USA was doing elsewhere in the Western Hemisphere. So Japan wanted also to emulate what USA was doing. Then in 1938, Japan controlled almost all the Chinese territory. So why did she do that? She did that with an excuse that the Chinese, they fired upon their troops. See, so in 1938, Japan almost controlled China. So she did that by force and claimed that the Chinese, they fired or they killed their troops. So we are taking over China. So their aggressive foreign policy drove them again into the Second World War. So they joined the Second World War, which broke out in 1939 because of their aggressive policy. So they started by invading French Indochina. So the French Indochina, that part in China which was under the French in 1940, that one was invaded by the Japanese. So why did they do that? The aim was they wanted to control Southeast Asia. So here we are looking at them, the Japanese, trying to champion the Asia for Asian policy, Asia for Asians policy. So with that, then they developed the aggressive foreign policy. They wanted to drive out the Western countries and dominate Asia. So that was the aim of Japan in Asia. And after Japan had done that, had invaded the French China, then USA imposed oil sanctions on Japan since she was her greatest supplier. So oil of China, of Japan, was coming from the USA. So when Japan in 1940 invaded French Indochina, then USA said no more oil to Japan. So with that, then it was another, it had impact on Japan. Then when General Tojo became the Prime Minister of Japan, he confessed Emperor Hirohito. There was Emperor Hirohito. Emperor Hirohito. So he was convinced by General Tojo to destroy the American troops before they could take over Southeast Asia. So you can see there that it's purely politics that is happening there. Japan is eyeing the same. Japan wants to control. We have said here that she invented French Indochina with the aim of controlling Southeast Asia. Now, after she did that, USA acted by not supplying the oil to Japan. Then with that, then the Japanese sensed through this one, General Tojo, who convinced the leader, the Japanese leader, Emperor Hirohito, to say, no, this time around we have to destroy the American troops before they invade or they take over the area that we want also to invade, that is Southeast Asia. So with that, then we saw to it in and we're going to look at this one again in very soon when we'll be looking at the Second World War. Japan provoked USA into the Second World War when they attacked the American naval base at the Pearl Harbor, and this was done on 7th December 1941. So it was all the plan from General Tojo after convincing Emperor Hirohito to destroy the Americans. So they carried out their plan by bombing the Pearl Harbor in 1941 on 7th December. And that action provoked USA or invited USA into the Second World War. Now we have looked at the situation in Asia, and we have dwelled much on Japan because we have said that Japan dominated Asia because she was the most industrialized country. Around 1890s, she was the most industrialized country. As a result, she was the greatest supplier of warships or war weapons to the Allies during the First World War. And also, she was the greatest supplier of silk. So Western countries, they were relying much on Japan. But she also had those challenges, including the great earthquake that attacked them. Then there was the destruction of industries. And also, we have looked at it to say her economies were affected during the time when the European countries recovered from their weaknesses or their weak economy. Then they were no longer importing goods from Japan. And with that, then the Japanese economy started to go down. And with that, Japan wanted to dominate Asia because Asia was taken by as colonies of the Western countries. So she developed the philosophy of Asia for Asians, whereby she wanted to capture by force to get all other territories in Asia by force and dominate it for trade purposes in order to develop her economies. But that one provoked other Western countries, and with that, it did not go well with Japan until she entered the war, the Second World War. So of which the war part or the Second World War part, we're going to look at it when we come to that topic, the causes and the results of the Second World War. But next, we have to look at the conditions in the USA in the early 20s. So in the early 20s, what happened in USA? Remember, the major topic that we are looking at is the developments in the interwar period. So 1920s, it's just soon after the end of the First World War. So what was the situation in USA? So this is what we'll be looking at next.
Simutaya nthawi yanu kufunafuna maphunziro muzakhala wotumidwa moyo wanu wonse. Ngati simuphunzira anthu azingokutumani ajala kalime ajala kuchwe manyazi ajala katende yanti ndipo anthu ophunzira wandi wotumanso kwambiri. Ndiye ngati simuphunzira skulu akuyikirani apa mukhala otumidwa.